I'm Mustafa. Hello, I'm Ahmad.
And I'm Jihad. In the past few years, many potential pro-Iranian terrorists are facing the same difficult challenge. Since the global sanctions on Iran were instituted, all of us are lacking the funds for producing the next big terror attack.
All of us have great innovative plans for new attacks.
Right now, today, continues to be obsessed with a new nuclear deal with Iran. I believe the Biden administration should immediately go to the UN, invoke our snapback authority, and keep the embargo in place.
Hezbollah was founded in the early 1980s in the aftermath of the Islamic Revolution in Iran by a group of about 500 militants from the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. The founders aimed to advance the radical Islamist ideology of the Iranian religious clerics and fight a war against Western influence in Lebanon and the region. Even today, when Hezbollah is a political and military organization with tremendous domestic and regional influence, its leaders and commanders answer to the command of the supreme leader of Iran, both in the political and religious realms. Hezbollah relies on Iran for almost all aspects of its existence. Its budget of hundreds of millions of dollars a year comes almost entirely from Iran. Hezbollah uses this budget to fund cultural and social activities for the well-being of the Lebanese Shiite population, through which it lures them to adhere to its ideology, to maintain political activities and alliances, 3. And to execute military operations, them to adhere to its ideology, to maintain political activities and alliances, 3. And to execute military operations. Hezbollah is almost completely dependent on Iranian arms. The organization maintains a sophisticated smuggling mechanism to ensure the passage of weapons from Iran, through Syria, and finally to their destination in Lebanon. Upon arrival, arms are distributed and stored in Shia-dominated areas such. Among the advanced weaponry Hezbollah receives from Iran are unmanned aircrafts, drones with attack and reconnaissance capabilities, anti-ship missiles, long-range surface-to-surface missiles, and air defense systems. Iran continued its terrorist-related activity in 2019, including support for Hezbollah, Palestinian terrorist groups in Gaza, and various terrorist groups in Syria, Iraq, and throughout the Middle East. Iran used the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Quds Force (IRGF) to provide support to terrorist organizations, provide cover for associated covert operations, and create instability in the region. The United States has at various times in recent history provided support to terrorist intangram around the world. It has also provided assistance to numerous authoritarian regimes that have used state terrorism as a tool of repression. Pressure is mounting on the Biden administration to take harsher action on Iran as senators claim Iran's oil wealth is helping fund Russia's war on Ukraine. At a review of the 2024 State Department budget request on Wednesday, Republican Senator Ted Cruz called the Biden administration weak, claiming its weakness on Iran is indirectly supporting Russia's war efforts, in addition to boosting its nuclear capacity. Senator Cruz said earlier this year, "I'm deeply concerned, however, that no matter how much you may want to help Ukraine, there is something the Biden administration wants more, which is to re-enter a nuclear agreement with Iran," he said. This administration has shown weakness on Iran since day one, and continues to do so. Just in the last few weeks there have been reports that you again waived congressional sanctions to allow Iraq to move money to the Central Bank of Iran, which the Ayatollah uses for terrorism, for ballistic missile development, and nuclear weapons work. President Obama announces a historic nuclear deal with Iran. July 14, 2015, the Biden administration has restored a sanctions waiver to Iran, a senior State Department official said, has indirect talks between Washington and Tehran on returning to the 2015 nuclear agreement entered the final stretch. The indirect talks are aimed at having the United States return to the agreement and Iran resume compliance. The agreement was reached under former President Barack Obama, and Biden has pledged to try to bring the United States back to it. Biden finishing the job my administration started, Obama says in June 1, 2021 tells New York Times. Trump interrupted the continuation of his policies. So here we see Obama emerging from behind the scene with another support to Iran.
Talk about how the war is going, and I know that you and I both agree that it is important for Russia to suffer a crushing defeat. Putin is a KGB thug, and he's committed to undermining our interests and Our enemies across the globe, including in particular China, are watching carefully what happens in Ukraine. The Iranian regime is watching as well. And Iran is committed to doing everything they can to ensure Putin's victory. They're supplying Putin with resources, especially drones, which are devastating Ukrainian civilians and military assets. Meanwhile, the Biden administration, which waived the sanctions on Nord Stream 2, the last and best hope of preventing the war, right now today continues to be obsessed with a new nuclear deal with Iran. Iranian officials say talks remain ongoing, while administration officials say they remain committed to diplomacy, but not right now.
Yes, Biden is finishing the job Obama's administration started, Obama says. President tells New York Times President Trump interrupted the continuation of our policies by not intervening into his policy, so uses Biden to run his affairs, according to New York Times.
I'm deeply concerned that this administration, even in the middle of a war, is subordinating the need to counter the Russian-Iranian alliance to its own partisan political preferences. For example, this administration has dropped the general UN arms embargo against Iran. This administration has made Russia our intermediary in nuclear talks with Iran. This administration has issued sanctions waivers, allowing the Ayatollah to become Putin's nuclear client. This administration has withheld weapons for Ukraine to target Iranian operatives in Crimea, helping Russia launch drones. And this administration has avoided using relevant sanctions authority against Iranian banks, facilitating the transfer of drones to Iran. As a result, Iran has been able to dramatically boost Putin's war in Ukraine. Meanwhile, America and the American taxpayer are shouldering the burden of assisting Ukraine, while the Biden administration is greasing both sides of this war. Let's talk about Iran's supply of drones to Russia. The Biden administration made an immediate decision to go to the United Nations and drop the general UN arms embargo on Iran because they say it was required by the original JCPOA nuclear deal.
In the past few years, many potential pro-Iranian terrorists are facing the same difficult challenge. Since the global sanctions on Iran were instituted, all of us are lacking the funds for producing the next big terror attack.
All of us have great innovative plans for new attack.
And it's not only our problem. Without money from Iran, we are on our own.
With so many great violent terrorist initiatives but no money, our only hope is asking for your generous American donations.
Donate $50 for the next terror attack and get this cool t-shirt.
Donate $500 and have your name added to the list of our supporters when we claim responsibility for the attack.
Donate $500,000 and you could decide where in America to launch our new terrorist bombing and help make the world a better place.
Or you can support the Iran deal. The $100 billion in frozen bank account being returned to Tehran under the agreement will give us enough money to execute all our terror attacks in the US.
When Congress votes in favor of the deal with Iran, they ensure the funding for the next terrorist attacks against America. Don't finance the murder of other Americans. Don't put $100 billion in the hands of Iranian terror.
Yes, you agree with Congress's assessment that the PLO is a terrorist organization.
Yes.
Congress, in light of that determination, has imposed multiple sanctions on the PLO. One set of sanctions prohibits the president from granting visas to PLO leaders to enter the United States. Another prohibits Americans from doing business with them. In October, the administration waived some of those sanctions and went to the Treasury Department to circumvent others. You did that specifically to bring the Secretary General of the PLO to Washington. You held press briefings for him with top State Department officials. Why did you do that? Why did you bring a terrorist leader to the United States?
Senator, we have the authority to waive in the national interest.
I
and
didn't
we
ask
did
if you had
so.
the authority to waive. I said,
We brought the delegation here to the United States to have discussions that would go to a number of interests that we have that go to Israel's security, frankly.
So you were not concerned with the fact that the PLO has been determined to be a terrorist organization. You were not concerned with the fact that you were violating congressional determinations that we should not bring terrorist leaders to Washington. Instead, you sought a specific waiver. And your justification, your public justification, which you gave a variant of that right now, is that you think we should engage with terrorists. The problem, Ms. Leaf, is that your strategy is failing, and it's failing catastrophically. On Friday, you sent a report to Congress officially certifying that the Palestinian Authority and the PLO, and I'm going to quote, that they have not met legal requirements for, quote, terminating payments for acts of terrorism against Israeli and U.S. citizens. Now, publicly, when the administration defends engaging with terrorists, you claim things are going well. But when you file a statutorily mandated report with Congress, you admit the PLO is continuing what are called pay-to-slay payments. They are paying for terrorists to murder Americans and to murder Israelis. And nonetheless, this administration is bringing those terrorist leaders to Washington, is bringing them to cocktail parties to wine and dine political leaders in the administration, and is also funneling. Last year, the Biden administration, USAID said, USAID, this is another quote, has invested $150 million this past year to empower Palestinians to build thriving and resilient communities in violation of at least the spirit, if not the letter, of the Taylor Force Act. Why, given that you have now certified to Congress that the PLO is continuing to pay terrorists to murder Americans and murder Israelis, why is the administration sending $150 million to them? Given that you have now certified to Congress that the PLO is continuing to pay terrorists to murder Americans and murder Israelis,
Donate $500 and have your name added to the list of our supporters when we claim responsibility for the attack.
Donate $500,000 and you could decide where in America we launch our new terrorist bombing and help make the world a better place.
Or you can support the Iran deal. The $100 billion in frozen bank accounts being returned to Tehran under the agreement will give us enough money to execute all our terror attacks in the U.S.
When Congress votes in favor of the deal with Iran, they ensure the funding for the next terrorist attacks against America. Don't finance the murder of other Americans. Don't put $100 billion in the hands of Iranian terror.